better close these before we get arrested. Hi, my name is Dan Curtis, and you have seen some of our cars with If This Car Could Talk a couple of times before. And this car that we're doing today is a 1970 American Motors AMX done in red, white, and blue to emulate a Superstock AMX, which we have shot on this channel before as well. And this one is heading out to a customer that is located in outside of Kenosha, Wisconsin, and he has a collection of red, white, and blue American Motors cars. And he asked if we could make this one for him as well. And so this is the car that will be heading up to his museum in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Ready? Yeah. All right, so as we walk around this car, you'll notice that it has the red, white, and blue paint scheme. Now, the factory Superstock AMX came from American Motors with a red, white, and blue paint scheme as an option, which was actually done by Hearst when they converted these 1969 American Motors AMXs to the Superstock AMXs. Now the colors we used on this one are actually American Motors colors, whereas Hearst had used. So this car is Matador red on the front, it's frost white in the middle, and it is a blue color that was used on the Big Bad Blue cars, so it's the Big Bad Blue. And what we did with this one is we also put these wheels on it that are the same wheels that were on my Superstock AMX. These happen to be Weld. The ones that are my Superstock were the Krager Super Tricks, but it was basically the same wheel. And so this is a pretty interesting car in that it's fully restored, and we put a lot of performance options in it, which I'll show you in a minute, including it's got a 5-speed TKX transmission. You can see the red button on the shifter knob. That is a line lock, which locks the front brakes so that when you are trying to warm up your slicks on the car, the front brakes hold it from rocketing forward when you dump the clutch to spin the tires. And so this is a delightful car to drive. It has a 3.54 rear end, but with the overdrive on the TKX 5-speed, you can cruise on the freeway at 2,500 RPM instead of 36 or 3,700. So it's really a delight to drive.
Which we will find out later.
And then we'll take a look at under the hood. And one of the things we ended up doing to this was it has a fully balanced and blueprinted rotating assembly. And we ended up putting one of the cross ram intake manifolds on it and put a roller cam in it and some big tube headers and all kinds of stuff. So this engine that started from the factory at roughly 325 horsepower is now over 500. And this car totally rips. First and second gear with this TKX transmission is very short, and the thing just takes off like a rocket. And you can see here next to the power brake booster, that is the line lock mechanism. So when you pump the brakes and you hold on to that button, that keeps the front brakes locked, and that way you can warm up the tires when you're trying to race. And these two carburetors...
That's an original, that's an original piece? I mean, would it come with that?
No, we added that to it.
That.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's what you would use for racing.
Okay.
And so these two carburetors, unlike what they came from the Hearst plant, or the Hearst Voodoo Skunk Works, is these are twin 390 CFM carburetors for a total of 780 CFM. And we used on this one, to make it a little bit more street friendly, we used vacuum secondaries and even put an electric choke on it. So when you start this car, even though it's got a ferocious engine in it, it'll go up onto fast idle, and just like a normal car. So it's kind of a fun car.
It's a pretty engine.
Came out pretty nice. We opted to do things a little differently than they did originally. So what we do is we use a high pressure fuel pump, and this is a fuel pressure regulator. And so what we do with the fuel pressure regulator is we get the one with 2 outlets so that we can run both carburetors. And so normally you'd have the line coming up from the fuel pump, you'd have a splitter right here, and one would go to one carburetor and one would go to the other. But we opted to make it a little bit cleaner, and it looks a little bit prettier with those braided hoses on it. Now you'll notice on the left-hand side, up against the firewall, you see a couple of hoses with hose clamps on them, or caps with hose clamps on them. And where there's a round black piece with a little triangle on the top, that's where the heater fan motor would normally go and the heater hoses would go, but this cross ram intake manifold doesn't have any of that stuff. It doesn't have a water fitting, and so we block off the heater core and cover up where the fan would go. Now on a factory Superstock car, the heater core wouldn't even be there. So there would be a block off plate where those two caps are. But otherwise, this is pretty much the way you'd find a Superstock, with the exception of the battery would normally be in the trunk. And we opted to leave the battery up front because this is a tribute. It's not meant to be a clone that would be indistinguishable from the regular. And but the regular, you can't really drive on the street, and this one you can. So it's a delight to drive. You'll also notice under the hood, there's this black piece here. This is at the end of the snorkels on the hood, which I'll lower the hood for just a second and show you. So that's the inside of those snorkels. But on a regular 1970 AMX, you'd then have this wide plenum right here, and you'd have a piece in here with a flapper in it that sets down on top of the air cleaner. And when you stomp on the throttle, the flapper opens and allows the air to be driven into the single carburetor. Obviously, when you have twin carburetors, you can't do that. And so we remove that stuff, and there's so little clearance with this big intake that we opted to not put a hood pad on this because the hood pad will rest up against that.
Oh, sure.
So plus it's a nice paint job underneath, so it looks nice.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's a fun car to drive and sounds great. And you heard it. And you heard it during the video where it had all of a sudden started making a lot of noise, and that's because we put 3-inch cutouts on this, electric cutouts, so that when you flip a switch under the dashboard, all of a sudden you have open headers, which is kind of a hoot as well. And when we take it for a drive, we'll flop those open as well and annoy the neighbors.
That's when you got to do it early in the morning.
Yes. Well, it makes a lot of noise. I don't think people like their alarm clock to be an open exhaust system on a car. But everything else in the car works like you would expect. It's got the wipers are functional, and everything on the car works, and it's a lot of fun. Now, one detail we added, which we did on my Superstock AMX that we videoed before for this channel, is we added these exterior gauges because there's no place really to put the gauges unless you're putting them on the steering column, and that blocks the view of the speedometer and some of the other gauges. So this is a water temperature gauge and an oil pressure gauge, and that way when you're driving, it's right in front of you when you're driving. And I kind of like the old school look as well. So this car I actually bought as a painted car. It actually came from Massachusetts. And there was somebody closed the hood, and there was a dingleberry in the hood, so we had to fix that. And then the first car show I brought it to, the person that was next to me got out of their car, and when they got out, their fanny pushed their door into that front fender right above the 390 and put a big chunk. It was my first car show. They took a big chunk out of that. So we brought it in, and thankfully, you can't tell that we ended up, it was right here. We fixed the chip and then blended the paint and then re-cleared the fender, and it came out great. You can't tell. And likewise with the hood, there was a dingleberry on the hood over here where somebody had shut the hood and left something standing up, and it put a dent in the hood, and we were able to fix that, and that came out. So we did quite a bit of paint touch-up work on this, and then had to do a lot of work with the brakes and the suspension, and of course enhancing the engine to have that 500 horsepower instead of 325. And there were things like the grill was broken in places, but my shop restores these, and so we were able to take care of everything on it, and it came out really nice. But I have to admit, the person who did the body work on it did a very nice job before us. We don't usually see cars from another shop with the body work of this quality, which is the type of bodywork that my shop is known for, but this one, clearly, somebody did a nice job. And thankfully, the Arizona Department of Motor Vehicles had the plate that's on it available, which I was surprised at. But again, they only made 52 of the real Superstock AMXs, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised. And so that'll, when the car goes to the new owner, that plate will go up in my wall with all the other vanity plates that I had for the other 5 red, white, and blue AMCs that we had previously done on this channel. And folks, if you haven't seen that, that's a great video of the 5 red, white, and blue AMC cars. And one of them looks almost like this, except it's an actual race car, which
It'll get linked below.
This one is a tribute.
You'll be able to see it.
Right, and then we have another one coming at some time in the future, my original 1968 AMX that I bought in 1971 and I've had over the past 54 years, on and off. I sold it a couple of times and bought it back a couple of times. But we're just finishing that one up too, so that'll be a fun one to do.
All right, we are going to get ready to go for a ride.
It's a fairly civilized car for what it's got in it, and it's a blast to drive.
Sounds like it now, anyway.
I can't imagine having this driveway in some place that's in the wintertime, but...
No, we've done that. It's
Yes.
not good.
So one of the things we do when we build these cars is we end up, on the performance engines in particular, we put in a big 3-inch X pipe on these things so that both sides of the exhaust have the same amount of back pressure, and that 3-inch X pipe on these long tube headers, which are also large tube headers, it makes a unique sound on these cars, which you'll hear when we go down the street. It sounds kind of like a Formula One car a little bit when you really get on it, and hopefully there'll be enough space and opening in the traffic that we'll be able to give a little blast.
Now, every one came with a number? Is that
Yes,
correct?
so the numbers are not sequential, and in fact you'll actually see some numbers in the 1970s, the last year that they made these cars, that exceed the actual number of cars they made. And every now and then at an AMC car show, you'll be able to find one that somebody's offering that's a blank, because somebody in the factory decided to grab a handful of them and bring them home. So you can see the gauges are functional up there.
Yep.
We've got, this car has amazing oil pressure. It's cold, and it still has almost 50 pounds of oil pressure, even though the temperature gauges come up. But it'll drop down a little bit, but it has amazing oil pressure on this car. And that's one of the signatures of the engines we build. We blueprint the oiling system, and as a result, they always have great oil pressure.
Did you have to find all of the dash and everything?
No, this car was a complete car when I bought it.
Oh.
However, there were a lot of things on it that needed attention, and the dash was one of them. It had some ripples in it, and we were able to get nearly all of the ripples out. But that was half throttle.
That was fun.
Half throttle. But unlike a lot of these rough and tumble muscle cars, and this is a serious muscle car, this one rides pretty nice.
It rides great.
Doesn't make any rattles, doesn't make any noise,
No.
and it's nice and taut feeling, but not harsh feeling.
No back seat, as you'll see.
Yes, these are all 1968 to 1970 AMXs were all 2-seaters. You can hear the sound that engine makes. I don't know how much it'll carry through on the microphone, but it really does have an amazing sound to it.
Sounds great.
These have, we have vacuum secondary carburetors in this, and we have a tendency on these setups to put in a little bit heavier spring so that the secondaries on the 2 4-barrels don't come on too fast, because they can be difficult to control. So we option this one up with a little bit heavier springs, which takes a little bit longer for the forebarrel to open up. But on the other hand, it doesn't make it spin around like a top, and the rear tires break free at half throttle.
Right, yeah. Really nice combination of everything.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice running and driving car. I'm sure I'm going to have some seller's remorse on this one, because this is a car that is just a blast to drive.
So if somebody was interested in you building them something like this, they could just call you up and say, hey, I want one just like the video?
Yeah, it's hard to come by donor cars, so our preference is that the person who wants us to build one for them actually have a car already. What ends up happening when you're in the restoration business and you end up buying a car and then building it for somebody, the car can only have so much value as a completed car, and as a result of that, you find that you end up basically giving the price of the car away, because the work that you do on it is in excess of the value of a car that you're selling. So it's our preference that the customer bring their car in. That way we're not taking a beating when we build a car for them. This happened to be a car that I bought at a very reasonable price, actually lower than it would have cost my shop to take it to the point it was when we got it. And then we did another $40,000 or $50,000 worth of work on it, and the customer, at the customer's request, so all the extra work was at his expense rather than at ours. One of the primary necessities of being in business and doing this kind of stuff is you really have to make money at it. Otherwise, it's a hobby or a charity.
You're not in business very long.
Yeah. So in order for us to stay in business, we have to make sure that you know, we're getting paid enough for the work we're doing, so that we're not doing it at a loss. All right, with any luck at all now, we're going to come around this corner and there won't be anybody in front of us, and we can walk this thing through its paces. And we're going to be in luck because there's just one car coming.
All right, here we go.
We'll get it straightened out because it's very squirrely without it.
Oh, man.
As you can see, it has a little bit of power.
Oh, you guys wouldn't believe how that felt. That was fun.
And that wasn't floored. That was like 2/3 throttle. So it's just got.
I get to ride the coolest cars.
Yeah, it's got. So now here we are. We're in fifth gear.
Cruising.
We're in fifth gear. We're going like 55, 60 miles an hour, right around 2,000 RPM. So it can cruise along pretty nice at that speed. And it's quiet. However, we can also open up the exhaust dumps. So now we're running with the exhaust dumps open, and we'll slow down a little bit and give it some gas at the next light.
Yeah.
And hope the police don't come along, because they just don't have a sense of humor when you do this kind of stuff.
See, now if I was a police officer, no problem at all.
You'd think it was funny.
I'd want to go for a ride.
So right now you can hear the very loud exhaust sound.
Oh, man.
It has a bit of power. And I better close these before we get arrested. There we go.
Oh, that was awesome. What? That wasn't us?
And look behind us, the cars are a mile behind us. There's nothing behind us, and they were next to us at the stoplight. It's pretty hilarious. And we didn't get arrested. How about that?
Hey, all right. There's worse things to get arrested for.
We didn't actually go that much above the speed limit.
No.
However, we got there really fast. Tom stayed back at the house while we went for a ride, and we'll have to see if he could hear us coming down the street.
Yeah, that'll be a good question.
Shall we open up the dumps again so Tom can hear us coming?
I think we should.
was a fun one. And thanks to Dana and Tom for coming down and shooting this car. We always enjoy doing an episode for If This Car Could Talk.
Thank you.